to me and his channel.
What's up, it's your boy LOE Visuals. I'm back with another video. Y'all day going, y'all vibing, y'all chilling, y'all enjoying y'all day, y'all productive day. We back at it. Before I start, y'all smash the like button, smash the like button, smash the like button. On the road to 10K subscribers, hit that subscribe button, turn the post notifications on. Find me on any other platform. My link tree is in my bio. Follow my X at Visuals LOE. Follow my TikTok at LOE.Visuals. Follow my Facebook at LOE Visuals. So let's talk about it. So Teofimo Lopez tells Shakur Stevenson to have a trust fund set up, Vows to destroy Shakur Stevenson. If you guys don't know, they have a fight. You know, they're in negotiations for a fight. We haven't had an official date yet, but everything is leaning towards those guys fighting in the early part of 2026. And I'm excited for it. I do think it's stylistically it's a great fight. The only thing I'm kind of not with is them putting the fight on pay-per-view. I mean, just not right now. Boxing isn't in a place to just be doing pay-per-view cards. Respectfully, I just don't think we're in a space to just we're already paying for premium regular sports. Basketball. You gotta pay pretty much $1,000 to watch NFL. So boxing is not in a place to be doing that. So that's probably the only thing I'm not feeling is them trying to put the fight on pay-per-view. But as far as the fight, I think T.O. just trying to boost his confidence up. Just saying something to get the juices flowing, because I don't think he really believes he's gonna destroy Shakur Stevenson. When has T.O. ever destroyed anybody? And really we just don't know what T.O. we get. We're gonna get. Because some days T.O. comes out and under the lights he looks amazing, but some days we get blunders under the lights. It just depends on how focused T.O. is. But this fight stylistically, this isn't a style that T.O. really does well with most of the time. Guys that slick and can box, defensively sound, and that's three of the things Shakur Stevenson is. He's just defensively sound, but the way T.O. might have a chance against Shakur, it would have to be like, him like outworking Shakur Stevenson, which, you look at Teofimo Lopez output, throughout his career, doesn't really have the highest output. Like, Williams Zepeda high output, we thought that, there was a chance that maybe he could outwork Shakur Stevenson, and, that wasn't the case in that fight. So, we thinking if T.O. goes in there and the fight slows down, it could be bad for T.O. because that means Shakur's in a groove, and he's having his way and just banking rounds from T.O. But if it's kind of the action is fast paced, it's quicker, that kind of favors T.O. in my opinion. He's still kind of athletic, he's still kind of wiry, but if it slows down and the fight turns into a boxing fist where, T.O. is trying to land and he's trying to chase Shakur, and, he can't, it could possibly get ugly for T.O. But, he seems to be confident, this is pretty much, his only option. A lot of people saying that, Shakur was kind of begging for the fight, but I mean, how can you punish a guy for wanting to fight, the best? T.O. is considered the best 140 pounder. So how are we going to, kill and make fun of, Shakur for wanting to fight the best? That's what I don't get, and I see it all the time from some of these, websites like Boxing News, they you can tell who their favorites is. They like Ryan, they like T.O., they like Canelo. They have their favorites, guys they don't like, Devin, Shakur, those are the guys, they don't really typically like, Crawford, And it's a lot of, articles. You could tell that, they're being paid by somebody to write, propaganda and push a narrative. But, I'm just here to debunk all that, I don't think, Shakur was big and they were just pursuing the best fights, and a lot of people are like, oh, he doesn't want to. Why would I want to fight my mandatory who hasn't really proved anything? He's just getting it mandatory because of who he is, but he hasn't done anything. Respectfully, if I'm lying, I please show me, you guys. But yeah, it has potential to be like, a great fight in my opinion. It just depends on, how the fight plays out. Does Teo come in focused? What Teo we get? Because we know what type of Shakur Stevenson we're gonna get in this situation. He's gonna be laser focused, getting this opportunity. But Teo does have a thing that he usually does. When the lights come on, he lock in, and I gotta give him it. In his last few performances where he was facing guys that could box, he struggled. He struggled. A lot of people was like, he shocked a lot of people beating Arnold Barboza, but this isn't Arnold Barboza, so I want Teo to understand that he does have the size advantages, so he's gonna have a little advantages, but Teo's really not a big 40, so is it really an advantage? Everything else, he doesn't really have a crazy reach or anything. I mean, his power hasn't looked the same since being at 140, so it's a lot of variables that kind of favor Shakur, and it was basically, Teo was in a no-win situation because he didn't want to go up to 47 and fight Ryan Garcia, which would be a bigger fight. It's kind of like I don't want to give up the leverage I have and go up when I can get a guy to come up to me. So that's kind of why he's kind of leaning towards taking this Shakur Stevenson fight. Because Ryan Garcia tried to swoop out and, get Teofimo Lopez. But we know Ryan Garcia can't make 140. So, and even though, Teo is the linear champion at 140, he wouldn't be the A-side against Ryan Garcia. So, it kind of takes some of the Shazam off of it. As far as Shakur, it's kind of 50-50, so... and with Teo being the champion, he would get like the lean. So that's why I kind of feel like this fight got made. It wasn't because Teo was daring to be great, but I mean at 40, what was he gonna do? He doesn't want to fight Richardson Hitchinson. So Alberto Puello, those guys don't really do anything for him as far as financially. So that's why we hear him trying to get Shakur Stevenson fight and get this done, because the other nonsense doesn't benefit him. You just got to catch the plays from these guys, If he had leverage in that Ryan Garcia fight, I'm pretty sure he would go take it. But he doesn't really have any leverage, so kind of why he went with the Shakur Stevenson fight. So, we can't blame him. But, Shakur Stevenson, this is, what this would be his fourth weight division. Shakur started at 26. Yeah, this would be his fourth weight division. Him, if he could somehow beat Teo and grab another title, he would kind of be setting himself up, for, pushing, he's trying to be the leader of the new school. He's pushing it. And with that, he would be very accomplished. So, we couldn't kill him, and I told you guys, if Shakur really wanted to, stay around and, stay relevant and make people accept his style, he has to win. If he keeps winning, it's easier to make people accept you. But, one loss, they'll try to kick him to the curb, especially with the style he's having. Especially that, him and William Zepeda put on a great fight. And it was more stylistically. Some of those fights, y'all were trying to put him in there with counter punches, and he's a counter puncher. He's a defensive fighter. So, stylistically, when they was, matchmaking those fights, I don't think that was a good fight for him to look good. But, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Make sure y'all smash the like button, smash the like button, smash the like button. On the road to 10K subscribers, hit that subscribe button. Turn up on notifications. Find me on any other platform. My link tree is in my bio. Follow my X at VisualsLOE. Follow my TikTok at LOE.Visuals. Follow my Facebook at LOE Visuals. I love you guys so much. I'm out.